Hello, I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, and this is Radioland, my radio trends newsletter. You can find the website at radioland.email. And this podcast is sponsored by RSS.com. RSS.com, which is a very good podcast hosting company, has just launched an API, so you can interface RSS.com with your playout system or anything else that you want to. You can find out more information at RSS.com, which amazingly is their website. This is the podcast for December the 14th, 2025. AM continues to be switched off worldwide as FM gets a reprieve. And as I read that, I'm thinking, why am I telling you this? Because you can already see that in the podcast and you can already see the date. So perhaps I'll stop doing that and just go straight into... I've written a lot about the issues with AM. TalkSport removing a set of AM transmitters in the UK. The Americans frothing at the mouth about the removal of AM from cars after the slow dawning of realism in that country about AM's future. And of course, Absolute Radio switch off in January 2023, along with plenty of local stations. But once more, things are afoot. In Spain, Radio Nacional, RNE, is switching off its AM network on December the 30th at 3 in the morning. You can continue to listen on FM as well as online and via DAB+. The company says that AM has, quotes, become obsolete. Ouch. And in any case, FM signals for RNE cover most of the country. And here in Australia, the ACMA has allowed the ABC to switch ABC Radio Perth and Perth's ABC Radio National transmissions to FM. The ABC says that the switchover date will be announced in the new year. ABC News Radio also gets an FM transmitter, but let's come back to that one because it's slightly more complicated. I made a submission to ACMA, which you can read on my website, supporting the decision. The main reason I submitted is that the ABC is funded for emergency broadcasting, and emergency broadcasting is pointless if few people own a radio that picks up the emergency broadcasts. We already know that AM radio listening is very low in this country. Only 1 in 5 Australians listen in a given week. And trends are that the number of people who listen to AM will have halved in the last decade. We also know that the ABC agrees with that view, simulcasting ABC Radio Brisbane onto FM during Cyclone Alfred in order that it reached the largest number of people. An additional reason I gave was value for money for the taxpayer. The ABC could save more than $1 million by turning off the power-hungry AM transmitters, and that money should go into its radio output instead. My submission recommended that the same exercise happens in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Canberra and Hobart. At least that the ACMA should find an FM frequency for the flagship ABC local radio service. And as I've said here before, if there really are no frequencies available, then the ABC should remove ABC Classic from its FM frequency and make it a digital-only service in the cities. And my submission also asked for a change in a random, pointless law, of which more after the break. But I'll be on ABC Radio Canberra talking about ABC Radio Switch Off tomorrow, as I record this, Monday at 1 p.m. local time. So here's hoping that the politicians are listening. Now, if you do a radio show, you might want some world-class prep, and the right show prep, which can be delivered to you on time every day without fail, is probably what you want. And this show prep is called Show Prep, and you can grab a £1 week-long trial of Show Prep and stop chasing around looking for things to use on your show, running out of time before the show and trying to sight-read the newspapers. You'll find a link in my newsletter, which you'll also find linked from the show notes today. Now in Perth, ABC News Radio will be getting an FM frequency in 2026, but it won't be switched off from AM, even though it'll benefit from FM in the city. An expensive transmitter will continue broadcasting ABC News Radio on 585 kHz AM, because of a law made in 1946 that the Australian government seems unbothered to change. So here is your guide to the Parliamentary Proceedings Broadcasting Act 1946. It was a law passed by Labour PM Ben Chifley, and it requires the ABC to broadcast coverage of the federal parliament, either the lower or upper house, when they're sitting. They don't sit very often, it turns out, just 40 days a year, with 10 more days for estimates, which is the rough equivalent of a special committee in the UK. Since 1994, on the other 310 days of the year, the ABC has run a news radio station on those AM frequencies. A news radio station, by the way, which is doing very well, thank you very much, in terms of the audience figures. But yes, the AM frequencies. And it must be an AM frequency because in Clause 4.1a, the Parliamentary Proceedings Broadcast Act 1946 requires that parliamentary coverage must be broadcast on a medium-wave national broadcasting station. Probably because there was no other radio platform at the time. The ABC can also televise it if they want, but they still have to broadcast it on AM. And so, if you listen to ABC News Radio on AM, you'll hear 50 days of the year, Federal Parliament. Or you can continue to hear the news on DAB+, or the ABC Listen app. And that's why in Perth, ABC News Radio will continue on AM, requiring the entire AM transmitter facility to remain on air, and the 180-metre-high transmitter tower to be maintained, even if nobody will probably be listening to it. I'm going to take a wild guess that the costs there are around $750,000 a year when you add up electricity, maintenance and access, all because of a law made in 1946 which government can't be bothered to change. It's madness. So 2 things leading from this. First, ABC News Radio also broadcasts parliamentary proceedings on its FM frequencies as well as AM, despite no requirement to do so. Either they believe it's an audience winner, which I doubt, or they lack the switching capabilities to treat the FM transmitters separately, or nobody's realised that they don't have to, and I'd be fascinated to know which it is. Secondly, the Parliamentary Proceedings Broadcast Act 1946 actually says nothing about the broadcast strength of the signal. If the ABC wanted to, there seems nothing against them running a 5-watt AM transmitter on 585 kHz from the roof of ABC Radio Perth, which would be audible for about a mile. And that would be entirely within the requirement of the law. It would also be much cheaper. A new transmitter would cost $480, a wire antenna on the roof, $160, and you could plug it into a mains point with almost zero electricity cost. Rather cheaper than keeping a whole AM transmitter park going next to a housing estate that doesn't want it there. After all this talk of AM switch-off, the FM switch-off in Switzerland, due at the end of next year, has been cancelled. And FM will continue for at least another 5 years. Some reasons given are that the Swiss, lacking their own radio stations, will listen to stations from other countries, and that the switchover might hurt some commercial stations. It went to a vote in the National Council, and the Chamber made its decision by 21 votes to 18, with 5 abstentions. Ooh, close. Public radio has already turned off, but apparently they're going to turn their FM signals back on again. Robin Ince has resigned from the popular podcast The Infinite Monkey Cage and has recorded his last show. The show's one of the top 25 shows in the UK. He suggests his opinions outside the BBC have been considered problematic for some time. Increasingly, the benefit of doing a show for the BBC, a decent level of pay, a good level of job security, is being outweighed by the desire of the BBC to hamper your creative freedom in all other parts of your life. And I suspect he won't be the last to realise that he can probably have a perfectly successful career without the constraints of the BBC, and this talent drain will continue to damage the corporation. And interesting to see WBGO, a public media station in Newark, New Jersey, add programmatic ads onto its stream. The station has added thousands in incremental sponsor revenue, and apparently the audience doesn't mind that much. They're using SoundStack. Well, next I am speaking at Podfest. January the 15th to the 18th, 2026, where I'm also being inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame, which is a great honour. I'll be talking about where we've been and where we're going, a look back at where we've come from, including last year's podcast news and trends, to help us understand how podcasting is changing and how we should be changing with it, plus a look forward to what to do in 2026. And I'm speaking at Radio Days Europe in Riga in Latvia in March. Really should get around to booking that flight. My speech there is the future of audio is people-powered. The way people consume media is changing. I will take a look at the global trends in radio and on demand. How will we listen on which devices? How can we make our output truly unique? How do we do it in a resource-efficient way? And what part does video play in the future of audio? Yes, that'll be fun, won't it? RadioDaysEurope.com is where to go for your tickets for that. And thank you to our many supporters for this show, Media Results Inc., Broadcast Radio, Soma FM, and Play It Software, among others, alongside Greg Strassel, Sam Phelps, Richard Hilton, Emma Gibbs, Jocelyn Abbey and James Masterton for being regular supporters. If you would like to support my work in any way, you can buy me a coffee. You can become a member to give regularly or just give a one-off coffee, or 5 if you like. I link to where to do that in my newsletter, but it's buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland. I'm also on Mastodon. Please follow me. It'd be fun. He says, James at bne.social is where you'll find me on the Fediverse. And my website's got more details about who I am and what I do and whether I can help you further. That is at james.crid.land. And until next time, keep listening.